who is here as an observer from the Community Services Department of the South Caribbean Conference. So Ms. Marsha Francis, we're glad to have you with us. I also want to apologize on behalf of my colleagues who were here last week, Mr. James Williams and Ms. Marcia Mitchell. They both have other appointments today, so they can't be here this evening. But we are in good hands. Our presenter is Mr. Leon Granger. Leon is a former employee of the Ministry of Agriculture, with his last appointment being the CEO of the Cocoa and Coffee Board of Trinidad and Tobago. He is a graduate of ECIAF, just like me. He also went on to do his first degree in agriculture and his master's in crop protection. He has a vast range of experience all over this world in crop protection. So with no further ado, I hand you over to Brother Leon Granger. And for those of you who just came on, Brother Granger has asked if it's possible, you can put on your camera. We'd appreciate it so he can see the faces. So thank you. Brother Granger, it's all over to you.
Thank you, Sister Gabrielle. I would permit you to have your mics on mute because we can't ask all the children to be quiet while you listen, right? They too will be excited. But it'd be nice to have your camera on so I know I'm talking to an audience. Thanks again, Sister Gabrielle. I want to just say to you that agriculture has always been an exciting field for me. I mean, both my parents wanted me to enter some other profession. My mom said I should be a doctor. My father said I like to talk too much, I should be a lawyer. But I chose agriculture. And as I grew more and more into the church, I realized that agriculture plays a big role in what we do. We have someone in the waiting room, Carl Burgess. He is going to be our guest lecturer this evening, and he's going to take all of an hour and a half. So I will wind down what I have to say very quickly so that he could be promptly on time. I'm glad that all 40 of us are on. I want to say again, all you've got to do is click on participants, choose your name, under more, click on it, and we'll give you a choice to rename yourself. Rename yourself as new, and then your name if you are new to the training sessions today. And that is so that we can accommodate you with some notes of last week. And probably, if there's an overwhelming number, we could arrange a rerun of the first session that you would have missed. That is the reason for us asking who is new. Just put the acronym, the word new, the prefix, new before your name, and renaming yourself. And Sister Gabrielle, a screenshot.
Can I say something? Those of you who are new, and you never messaged me before, I will place my phone number in the chat so you can send me a WhatsApp message that I can add you to the group chat. Okay, Brother Leon, back to you.
Yes, thanks for that update. So we have an active group. I must say that is where all the action is happening. Outside of this session that we'll have, please be part of the chat group. You could ask your questions. Information will be given, guidance will be given. We'll be also able to follow the assignments that you've been given. And the assignments will be repeated today. You want to briefly give that assignment again, description, Sister Gabrielle?
Okay, so the assignment was to grow seedlings. Those of you who live close by were placed in groups and asked to come together and purchase seedlings. And then you choose where are you going to set the seedlings, whether you're going to purchase crates and set them in crates, or you're going to use a trough and set them as discussed in the class last week. You are also to decide what soil material you would use. The idea of putting you together in a group is to work together as a team, one, and also because of the cost involved to produce a tin of seedlings, because a tin of seed, sorry, will give you a number of seedlings. So The idea was to put it together so you can share the cost, as well as when the seedlings are grown, you can share it among yourselves, the group members. You can share it with other members of this class. Those of us who are in church, we can share with church members, and we can also share with members of the community. So that was the assignment. But those of you who lived far away and you can't be a part of the group, you were also asked to go to the plant shop. Some of them sell seeds in small amounts. You can ask to buy some seeds. The crops that we're working with is pak choy, tomatoes, lettuce, and pimento, and you can develop your own seedlings. So that's the assignment for everyone. Those of you who are new, when you send me a WhatsApp message, if you never did before, I would send you the YouTube link for last week's class. So you can look at it and catch up what we did last week. Over to you, Brother Leon.
Time is precious and it's moving on. So I want to make sure you benefit from every single moment. We have just about 10 minutes before we officially start our training session with Mr. Carl Burgess. Could our host make Carl a co-host so he can share his slides? And by way of introduction, I met Carl many years ago. Carl used to be an officer at the Crop Research Division of the Ministry of Agriculture in Centeno. Carl went on to share his skills and his calling with the Catholic Church when he joined them at the Mount St. Benedict, and enjoyed a period of being in charge of the agriculture there on Mount St. Benedict, as well as being a priest. Carl has since moved away from that calling and returned to agriculture. In fact, he became the general manager at the PCS Nitrogen Model Farm. Some of you may have heard about that model farm in Point Lisas. And in fact, it became a leading teaching center outside of Ekiaf and Centeno. And so today we are graced with the presence of Carl. Carl and I are actually working closely together for this program and for other programs. And therefore, on both sides, people are benefiting, whether you're a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church or you're a member of the Roman Catholic Church. In fact, there's a wonderful project he's working on. He's leading out in the Catholic communities for Trinidad and Tobago in that regard, gathering data from all its church members concerning agriculture, the practices, who has farms, who has lands, what lands are associated with churches, what lands are associated with schools. And it fell right in my lap when I realized, wait, this is something the Agriculture Steering Committee at the conference office is working on. In fact, I'm supposed to share some notes with Pastor Walcott later tonight, and our committee meets on Tuesday to discuss how we could adopt what Carl has already worked on, instead of, there's no sense reinventing the wheel, as I told my colleagues. So Carl is going to be pivotal in some of the things we're going to do, and he has consented willingly. Carl has retired just like myself, but for people like Carl, there seems to be no retirement. So soon I will invite him in, but before we do, for the next few minutes, and is there any burning question on what we did last week that you might want to ask now? Because I fear we may run out of time. I don't want to push you too late after the deadline has been met at 8 o'clock. So if there's any burning question now, you could just raise your hand and we'll ask Sister Gabrielle to coordinate the questions. I think Hazel has a question. Sister Hazel, go ahead, please. There's no questions from Sister Hazel. All right, we are hoping to get some feedback from all 4 groups. We developed 4 groups of 10 each, and we said if there are more people involved, and we expect that more people will join us in this training session, we'll go to a 5th, and if necessary, a 6th group, and we'll just allocate a different crop to them. Someone had asked, I think somewhere in the group chat, if they could try some bandania seeds, chardonnay. And I said, yes, by all means, do enough for the class and get the experience from doing it. Maybe incorporate somebody in your little circle, although you may live far from the main crowd. You might be able to get together with one or two others to see how chardonnay seeds can be germinated and how long it takes, and some peculiarities of it you would learn as you go along doing your assignments. So I hope that is going good. If you have any problems, please give us the feedback early. This is a course that is highly practical oriented. We have divided you up into groups from early so that you could compare notes, and we want you to ask questions. So if there is anybody with a question, we'll take that now. If not, if there are no questions, on the count of four, they say, on the count of four, we will turn over your attention to Mr. Carl Burgess, who is ready. And he reminds me that in his retirement, he doesn't want to work too hard, but he'll work. He is really top class when it comes to matters like these and training. And he's going to be our presenter or guest presenter this evening for vegetable gardening. All right, I see there are no hands up, no questions. I turn you over to the competent hands of Mr. Carl Burgess. Welcome, Carl.
Welcome, good evening, and welcome everyone. All right, we can start to share the screen. Okay, so today we're going to look at home backyard gardening. A little bit about myself, so you can read along. I did a master's in horticulture at the University of London, and did my first degree at UWI in agriculture and a diploma in management studies. I worked in fruit crops at Centeno for a while, then La Vega Estate, Vancouver as a manager. And the last job was really at Nutrien or PCS Model Farm, where we actually started the 30 hectares, about 75 acres of a model farm. So you have greenhouses, training facilities, about 10 acres of breadfruit, about 5 acres of citrus, what again? About 2 acres of, from what I remember, 2 acres of dwarf pomsity, mixed vegetables. You also had a demonstration plot, a 2-acre demonstration plot, showing farmers what can be done on 2 acres. So there's a lot of work actually starting that farm from nothing to where it is right now, and I left it in pretty good hands. All right. I also did a publication, A Farmer's Guide to Citrus Production. I did that with the IICA. I think that was in somewhere in the late 90s or sometime soon. All right. So I continue my training personnel, and I hope today that this afternoon it will go down pretty well with each and every one of you all. All right. What we're going to look at today is the planning, design, and layout of everything. Gardening in open areas, containers, choosing your vegetables, some of the management practices like fertilizers, watering, pest and diseases, and garden safety. All right. Safety came about because the company I work for, safety is one of their priorities. Like in every presentation I do, I try to outline aspects of safety, especially at home, which is important. Now, remember it's backyard gardening you're going to do. So when we go through to this evening's presentation, what I want you all to do is to think of your own backyard, visualize your own backyard, and see how you can incorporate everything. So walk around your space, well, maybe not this evening, tomorrow morning, walk around your space and choose a site based on sunlight. A maximum of 6 hours direct sunlight, especially for flowering plants, flowering vegetables, like tomato, peppers, pimento peppers, sweet peppers, hot peppers, melangen, okra. Anything that flowers need at least a minimum of 6 hours. Whereas the other plants like celery, chive, parsley, lettuce, pak choy, they could do it less sour because they're basically green type plants. But anything with flowers must get at least 6 hours direct sunlight. You must have a reliable and clean water source because remember you're looking for healthy vegetables for yourself and your family. So it's important that the water is really clean. A heavily shaded area results in elongated plants. But that means the plant actually stretching, looking for light. So you won't get proper growth on them at all. That's why I indicated sunlight is important for the flowering type plants. Wind is also important. A good air circulation reduces pests and diseases because the wind kind of reduces the humidity around a place. Less water is a lot drier, and fungus loves wet conditions. So by having wind blow through the area, it reduces that problem.
Mr. Carl,
Yeah.
may I interrupt you a bit? We're getting a little bit of feedback. I think everyone else is muted. I don't know if something is giving us feedback from where you are. Is it possible?
Actually, Gabrielle, it's not a feedback. Carl lives in a garden. And
So
those are the crickets. Those are the little frogs and crickets.
Okay, just give me 1 minute. Let me close the windows and see if that will make a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that characteristic sound. At this hour, you get the frogs. Yeah, especially if you had some rain. But he said he's going to close his windows, see if it makes a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I was hoping that more people will open the cameras. This is not a press show, so you don't have to be dressed up. I just want to eyeball a few of you, get to remember who you are, recognize you when I visit your church or your community, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Carl, it's better.
I hope it's much better now. All right. Always choose local vegetables. Sometimes we look at magazines and we see the magazines with pretty sweet peppers and tomatoes, etc. But those are generally for cold or temperate climates, not our hot tropical climates. If you have to buy a vegetable, choose something that is local. If you're going to a magazine, look and see whether it could be grown in a tropical environment. And always keep records. I'll come back to this in a little while, but keep records in everything that you do. All right. After you walk around the yard, etc., just draw a sketch of the area, showing all the relevant features, where the houses, where the fence boundaries, where you might have trees, open spaces, etc., in order that you could get the maximum amount of sunlight and also the amount of wind in your particular area. And then you decide on the best location for the establishing of vegetables, and always estimate or consider your available planting, working, and walking space. You don't have it so crowded that you can't walk to get something behind. When I come down to these slides, I'll explain it a little further. We all know the basic tools: a fork, garden rake, hoe, shovels, etc. Ruler, tape to measure distances, a garden hose, watering can, a spade, a cutlass, and your pruning tools. Okay. Always try to use the correct tool for the job being undertaken. Never leave the tools lying around. You know, most of the time the cutlass handle and the ground is the same color, right? So you have to be careful with that, or the fork or the spear, the same color as the ground, and you might just leave it accidentally. And then you have children around, might be running around, or you yourself might just make a step backwards and step on one of these things, and that is another problem. So always maybe use a bright color handles, painted if necessary, painted like in a bright orange or red or something, so it's always visible rather than the color which you buy it at. And if you're going to sharpen your tools or when you're using the tools, always wear eye protection, because you never could tell when you hit a stone or something and then it comes back into your eye. And then that again, that's another problem. Okay, so safety is important when you're using the tools. All right. We're going to look at soil. Now, soil itself, what we call topsoil, you have to be very careful what you call topsoil. Eh? Most of us would have gone on a hike to a forested area and walk on the ground. When you walk on the ground, you're going to find that the soil is kind of brown, it's moist, it have a lot of insects like millipedes and centipedes. You might see one or two little bones from a few bones from some dead animal or something like that, and soil with it. Normally dark in color, dark brown, could be black in some cases, right? And it normally has a scent attached to it. That is topsoil, okay? And it's normally around the first few inches, sometimes 8 to 10 inches of an area. So be very careful when you see people, when you go around the place and you hear people selling topsoil, right? Try and examine it. If it doesn't have any sort of leaf litter like dry leaves or small broken branches, is scent, etc., then that is not topsoil. A lot of the guys go around the place and tell you topsoil, and most of us may not know, and you just go and buy it, and then you end up with some kind of poor old, clear old dust, as you call it, in your home by you, and then that's another problem. So a topsoil have what you call a lot of humus, leaf litter, organic matter, all the things I spoke about, dead leaves drying up, moisture attached to it, and so forth, right? So that is topsoil. Anything else is not topsoil, right? And an ideal soil will have like a certain amount of air in it, water, mineral particles, and what we spoke about, the organic matter. That's like roots, the humus, which is decayed plant and animal material, and all the organisms that we spoke about, okay? So that is an ideal condition, right? The soil food web, right? This is what happens if you're doing like organic farming or backyard farming. This is basically what you might see in a soil, all kind of arthropods. You know, you might be familiar with like earthworms, and when the earthworm is like a shredder. So when it eats the matter and it passes it out, it breaks it up into a form where the plant itself could take it up. So you see all these different type of things within a good ideal soil, a good topsoil area, a soil food web. And for those of you all who are really getting into organic type farming, right, it's important that you use good soil, topsoil, and you'll have all these things in it, and that will help your plant grow better. Because everyone here, I'm perfectly sure that when you're taking a drive through the countryside, or you're looking up at the northern range or like the central range and things like that, nobody ever went around and fertilized the northern range, okay? By nature, God himself has made everything in such a way that when the leaves fall into the ground, everything is worked back or have enough minerals, etc., to actually fertilize the plants, keep the plants moist and things like that, okay? So you don't really have to have fertilizers to do your backyard gardening, right? So soil, what the soil organic matter does, it improves the physical structure of the soil. So most of the soils in Trinidad tend to be clay type soil, a very heavy clay, as you all would know it. They say like in the dry season, the fork will bounce back, and then the rainy season come like sapote, very heavy type clays. So the organic matter improves that physical structure of the soil. So if you have a lot of organic clay type soil, what you need to do is keep adding organic matter to it all the time. Once you add the organic matter, at some point you find that the soil is easier to work or to turn over when you fork it up, all right? As it holds all these residues and humus, it kind of reduces the water loss. It decreases soil erosion because it's not falling on empty or bare ground. And it supplies the plants with nutrients. You have like rotted manure, dry leaves, compost. If you're getting manure from anybody, make sure that the manure is properly well rotted. If it's not rotted, during the process of rotting, it gives off a lot of heat, and that heat will actually kill the young tender roots of your seedlings. So make sure that is properly rotted manure. If you need to use it, it might be better to use like small amounts regularly rather than a large amount at any one point in time. So the importance of the soil organic matter is basically to help improve the physical structure and to these other aspects here. So as I said before, most of our soils are generally clay type soils. And the clay, the drainage is very difficult for water to drain through it. And the whole plant growth may be hampered because it's a very tight soil, almost like what you call like what you used to make like plasticine or something like that. Okay, so the roots cannot penetrate the soil. A stony soil, on the other hand, or a sandy soil allows water to drain through very easily, rapidly, right? And therefore you need to water more frequently. So both in a clay type soil and in a stony soil, what you need to do is to keep adding organic matter to improve the physical structure of the soil itself. Now, if you're going to use your own garden soil, make your own mixture, all right? A suggested mixture, let's say you have a construction bucket. So you use one construction bucket of your soil, one construction bucket of your potting mix, it might be like peat moss or one of those things, one part of sharp sand, and one part of well-rotted manure. Okay? And you take all of those together and you mix it up like you're mixing cement, and you get a pretty good mix with that. The sharp sand would help with the drainage, especially for the clay type soils. Do not use anything from by the beach because that is basically salt, and salt actually pulls water out of the plant, out of the root of the plant. So it's kind of what they call dehydrates the plant. Right? And the type of soil mix will depend on your choice of vegetables. Generally speaking, if you're going to use like celery, parsley, chive, thyme, most of the green type vegetables, you will need a little more sharp sand because of the fibrous nature of the plant itself. Those plants, what happens is that if the soil is too heavy and holding too much water, then the roots will die. So don't feel how, as they would say, if when you wet the celery, the chive, and the parsley, and you have a lot of sand in it, the water runs through very quickly. Don't feel pressured about that or worried about that, because the organic matter, the dry leaves, etc., would hold enough moisture to keep the roots alive. Any questions quickly? Or let us wait until we reach the end and then write down your questions, and then we'll take everything at the end. Okay? In that way, I'll be able to get through the presentation thoroughly. Seedlings. So if you're going to buy I heard Gabrielle said that you might have to buy your own seedlings. Always choose a healthy looking seedling. Just by looking at it, you know whether it's healthy or it's not healthy. Free of visible pests and diseases. The stem must be upright because you want an upright growing plant. The roots white in color, meaning that they are very young and tender. And the rooting medium must be moist, meaning that when they take it out of the seedling tray, it has the shape of the seedling tray itself. If when they pull it out, you just see the roots alone, that means it's too dry. If when they try to pull it out, they can't get it out, it means it's too wet. So you have to get that kind of balance where it's neither wet nor dry. And so when you take it out of, when they're selling it to you out of the seedling tray, right, it comes out very easily. So if you're doing seedlings at home, try not to over-wet it because you're going to have too much, the roots are young and tender and the plant itself will die. All right? So you have to keep that balance, not too wet, not too dry. It's almost like a sponge. You know, if you take a sponge and you squeeze it, no matter how much you squeeze it, it still have a certain amount of water in it. That is the kind of environment you're looking for. Not too wet, neither nor too dry. I'll go through now. There are whole different varieties what you can choose your vegetables from, right? Now, if you're doing it on a larger scale, or one thing I forgot to mention is that in the programs that Mr. Granger arranged, try to look at it as a business also. You know, that you could grow your own seedlings at home and sell them. You might want to grow herbs at home, or the seasoning types, or just the other type of vegetables. Think of it as a business what you can actually start for yourself, maybe in your part-time and or eventually full-time, so that you could survive, let's say. So the tomatoes, all plants have a whole different range of varieties. So the tomato have these different varieties: sweet pepper, hot pepper, and you like to remember the scorpion pepper, hot pepper. Pimento is a local variety. When you're planting out your garden, try to avoid putting the hot pepper close to the pimento pepper, because when pollination takes place between one plant and the other plant, you might end up with the pimentos being as hot as the hot pepper, right? So you need to keep them separate and apart. You have the long purple melons, and that's the long one we see in the market all the time. And okra, these are just different varieties of the plants. So you just, in the beginning, as you're now starting, you could buy tomato. But when you start your business, you could sell the different varieties. So when I come by you, right, and I say I need to get this variety of tomato, then you'll be able to supply me with that variety of tomato. Now that it's just home use and backyard coming in for Christmas, whatever, you could take up whatever variety is available. The same thing like the lettuce, they have a whole range of different types of lettuce and romaine, butterhead, which is generally a green, very soft type, and so forth. Celery, parsley, chive, the herbs, cucumbers, cabbage, pumpkins, etc. It's like if you're going to buy cabbage, if you want to try the cabbage, when you're buying it, ask the person, or maybe if you're buying a tin, right? See how long it actually takes before from a seed to actually harvesting it. Okay? Now that is important also, because if you're going to do a business and I come by you for cabbage varieties or tomato varieties, you can actually tell me, okay, this variety of cabbage is 70 days, this one is 60 days, this one is 80 days, this variety of tomatoes is 2.5 months, this one is 3 months, and so forth. Okay, so different varieties have different growing seasons or times. The more popular one in the pumpkins will be the cropperback in Trinidad. If you're going to do cassava, you have all the different varieties. You have MX, Maracas, Black. MX is the more popular one we see in the supermarkets and the vendors at the side of the road, etc. The sweet potato, again, the most popular one is the chicken foot. But then there's the orange color varieties, like carrot is an orange color variety. And I would tend to see if you get, try to get these orange color variety, because they are more healthier. They have more anthocyanin, beta carotenes, fiber, etc., compared with the chicken foot. Yeah, so try and get the highly colored ones, either the orange, the yellow, or the purple varieties. And then you have arrows, dashing arm yellows, and couscous for those who want to try it at home. With these plants, remember the dashing, arrows, and so forth. What is important, it needs running water. Good, dashing grows in water, yes, but it needs running water. Because if you keep it in stagnant water, it won't have no oxygen in the water, the roots will die and the plants will die. So you need running water all the time. Right, so as I explained earlier, these are the things you need to know about the plant. The size of the plant, how tall it grows, how it grows, whether it's spreading upright, branching, not branching, the spacing between them, when it's bearing and harvesting, the whole life of the plant, pests and diseases, water and fertilizer. These are the things you have to have an idea of. If at this point in time you're not familiar with, because you're now starting and you're not familiar with a lot of these things, you could always Google tomato growing. You'll have tomato growing from all over the world, all right? Look for those in the tropics, like maybe like Florida or Cuba, or even Trinidad. The Ministry of Agriculture has a whole site on publications. You could look at those publications and get a good idea of the plant itself. Another important aspect is the product, the way, the shape, the color, texture, shelf life, cooking qualities, pests and diseases. Because if you're going to start it as a business, remember, if I come by you in the market and you're selling cassava, everybody knows the first thing, the question that asks you is whether it's cooking. All right. So you have to have an idea of aspects of the product itself. So that is a good selling point for you. It's a good marketing strategy and know about your plant. And that way you build a customer base. All right. All vegetables belong to different families. Right? So the Alliaceae family of chive, garlic, onion, Apiaceae, these, the cucurbits is like cucumber, watermelon, pumpkin, and squash. Tomatoes, peppers is the Solanaceae family. Now, what happens in this case is that anything that affects melon gen would affect, the same insect that affects melon gen would affect pepper, would affect tomato because it belongs to the same family. Okay? Anything that affects cucumber will affect watermelon, pumpkin, and squash because they belong to the same family. Okay, so that is important to remember. So if you decide only to grow cucumbers and pumpkin and squash, right, and you come down with a pest and disease, right, it's because it belongs to the same family. So in organic farming, what you try to do is have a little bit of everything. So an insect might affect the cucumber, but the same insect won't affect the cabbage or the lettuce or the celery because they belong to different families. This is the spacing that you could use between the plants and the average number of weeks to first harvest. So like if you plant out lettuce this week, or let's say you plant out lettuce next week, within 4 to 5 weeks, you'll start to get lettuce. In 3 to 4 weeks, you'll start to get pak choy from a seedling. Now, you might want to add about 2 weeks onto this if you're growing it from your own seedlings. If you take a seed and you sow it into the ground or in a container, it will take about 2 weeks to germinate, so maybe sometime 2.5 to 3 weeks before you actually transplant it into the ground. Right? So when you transplant it, you're getting about 10 to 12 weeks for cabbage. So it might 12 to 14 weeks from a seed. These here are from seedlings. Okay? So the quickest thing to get in life right now is pak choy. And then lettuce, you might get a 6 weeks okra. All right. Cucumber, you could get in about 6 weeks. Celery and parsley, you could start harvest about 5 to 8 weeks. Okay? And this is the spacing that you need to use for the okay? If you plant them too close, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a competition for light. So as I indicated earlier on, that competition for light, the plants will get leggy and will not flower and produce as much fruits as a lot of competition. So the space is important to get, and if you're getting all round lighting, even better yet. Coming back to sunlight in the beginning, the most intense sunlight is between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when you have the hottest sun. So if you have plants out at that time, you need to water them. Or if you have proper watering, the plants will go through that period very easily. If you're going to use containers, right, make sure you have holes at the bottom of the container so the water will drain out. Then you add a few pieces of newspaper or gazette paper, right? And then you can put some gravel on top of it so that the it will drain for drainage purposes. The purpose of the paper is to prevent the soil just leaking out if you overwater it, and the soil just running out of the holes that you put at the bottom of the container. Right? And then you add your soil mix, you leave it about 1 inch from the top for it to settle. And when it's settled, then you could always top it up, but do not overfill the container because that is just wasting soil and money and time. Then you could spot out your plants like here, so. Okay. You hold the plant very carefully in your hand, right? And you could take your fingers and make a small hole big enough for the plant to enter. And then just take your hand and just tap it around to firm it down into the soil itself. Yeah. For those of you all who have fancy fingernails and things like that, you might need to put on a pair of gloves, or you might take a small spoon, you know, the spoons, the plastic spoons, which you get when you buy a lunch outside. You could just use that because the size of the root media is just a little bigger than that. Right, so that will be sufficient to actually dig the hole for you rather than you having to put your hands into the soil itself. Yeah. And then you gently press and level the soil around the seedlings. And you can add some water, not much water, because remember you only have a small amount of roots. So if you overfill the whole thing with water, the whole container with water, or if you wet the ground thoroughly, right, it could be too soggy for those young roots and the plants themselves could die. Right, so just add some water, right? Not much, just to keep it moist. And you can put it down either on a cloudy day or late in the evening. That's the best time. You put it down at midday, the plant's going to droop because the sun is too hot. For those of you also doing the backyard and won't have to fork it up and dig it up, so you fork it up here, and then you rake it out to make all your beds here, and you leave your walking space. So the beds will be like around here, so. And you leave your walking space so that you actually could walk and see about the bed. Do not make the beds too wide because let's say you have it against a fence or something. Right, let's say this is the back wall here. Right, let's say this is your fence line here. And you make the beds too long. Right? How are you going to reach quite here in order to attend to the plant? So make it in such a distance that you can actually, the bed could be half this size, so that you can either walk from either side and see about the bed. Okay, like in this case here, so if you stand half of the bed, and if you go on the other side, right, you can see about the other half of the bed. So don't make it too wide where you cannot get to where you really need it. Sometimes what some people do is you plant a whole set of flowers in between the beds. Because the flowers, like for example, like marigolds, will attract a lot of insects and keep the insects away from your plants itself. Okay, so like marigold or crocus, or they call these sometimes trap crops. So they trap the insect before the insect go onto your crop itself. Plant nutrition. All plants need these elements. Huh? These I get from the atmosphere: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. You get this from the air. And the major nutrients, N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You get, these are the major nutrients, the micro, secondary, calcium, magnesium, sulfur, and the micronutrients. All plants need all of these things in order to grow properly. And in a topsoil, when the leaves fall from the trees, the branches fall, the bird bones, which will have calcium in it, because all our bones are calcium. But again, you'll find all this in good, naturally occurring in a topsoil, right? So if you use your topsoil, good topsoil, you really don't need to fertilize your plants because you will have everything here. So now, for those of you all who actually have to fertilize or intend to go into fertilizer, nitrogen It encourages leafy growth, stems, and branches. This is what nitrogen does. So you might buy a fertilizer like what they call growing salt. Growing salt is basically nitrogen alone. So it have 46% N, no P, no K. 30% N, that's 10% P and 10% K. So you have more nitrogen in these, high nitrogen content. Now the phosphorus, the second letter, remember it always go N, P, and K. N, P, K, calcium. Oh, that's the order, right? The phosphorus, on the other hand, is important for root development. Okay? So a lot of farmers, when they plant out their crops, what they do, they use like a 12, 24, 12, that's a common one in Trinidad, so high P, so they encourage root development. So the more roots the plant have, the more it will take up more nutrients from the soil, water, and nutrients. It will grow better and send out more branches, and you get more fruits. The potassium, which is the last one, NPK, NPK, is to promote flowers and fruits and keeps the plants healthy. So the 12, 12, 17, that's the one we call blue corn, or some people call it blue salt. It's basically 12 N, 12 parts of N, 12 parts of P, and 17 parts of K. So it has a higher K concentration because you want to promote flowers and fruits and plant health. Now, for home use, if it's for home use, I would sort of recommend a balanced fertilizer, like a 20, 20, 20, that's 20 parts N, 20 parts P, 20 parts K, or 10, 10, 10, or they have even 30, 30, 30, right? With micronutrients. So the micronutrients would be all these trace elements here, right? So balanced fertilizer will have the NPK, these, and all of these which the plant would need. So if you're going to fertilize your plants at home, I would recommend a balanced fertilizer with micronutrients and use it at about half the recommended rate. Right? Do not use it at full amount because the roots tend to be very young and still tender. And if you use it too concentrated, what could happen is that it could burn the roots and kill the plant. So it's safer to use it half the recommended amount, like once every 2 weeks. Okay? Now, some of you all might buy like the 12, the blue corn or the blue salt, right? And it's blue in color, yes. But what happens, it takes about 2 months before it actually melts away. So when you buy it, it looks blue, and then you start to wet it, it looks white in color. The fertilizer is still there. That fertilizer lasts for about 2 months. So don't feel that because the blue gone, that you need to fertilize again. So otherwise you're going actually over fertilizing your plants and wasting money. Right? So if you're using the 12, 12, 17 at the beginning, as soon as you transplant, you might use a small amount there, then, and just use it next time you're going to fertilize is when the plants begin to flower. Okay. For the other crops like the celery side and the green types, you need it at the beginning and you really don't need it for the rest of the life of the crop. But the ones that flowering, tomato, peppers, melons, and okra, as soon as they begin to flower, then you fertilize. Okay? And that will last you until the crop is finished. Generally speaking, if you're having a problem with fertilizing or the plants the leaves looking yellow, it normally happens is because of nitrogen, a P and a K deficiency in the older leaves. The young leaves, if you look in different colors, pale, etc., is because they have a micronutrient deficiency. So the micronutrient deficiency is basically in the young leaves, and the macro deficiency is NP and K is in the older leaves. Now the question becomes, the plant I'm in the dry season and the leaves looking yellow. It could be that it has no water, too dry. In the rainy season, the leaves looking yellow, too much water, right? So you need proper drainage. Now, if all things being equal and it's equal, it's looking good, and its leaves still turning yellow, that means that you have a a fertilizer deficiency somewhere along the line. Okay. Now, what is important, coming back a little bit, what is important, you see like 4600 or 30-10-10, 10-52-10, or 12-12-17, 20-20-20, and so forth. What is important is in numbers. It's not a question that you go to a plant shop and say, hey, this is good for tomatoes, and that good for this, and that good for that. No. What is important is the numbers are what is important, right? So I guess 44127. Remember 41N, 4P, 41K27. So what you're looking at is a high P. So this number here is a fertilizer which will encourage root formation because at a high P value. It has a certain amount of N and a certain amount of K, but you want it to push the plant. So you use a high, a 44127. A 15912 might be ideal for like a plant like any one of the green plants. Celery, chive, parsley, because you want it looking green and everything and looking green and green. So you have a high N. You don't want that amount of roots, but you want a certain amount of what they call K in it also. So a high N and a high K, but a low P. This would be ideal for like the green vegetables, celery, chive, parsley, onions, lettuce, pak choy, and so forth. All right. Same thing, like I said, we all see miracle grow all over the place, right? And they have a 24,816. There's a number here, right? Again, this will be ideal for like celery, chive, all the green vegetables, celery, chive, parsley, onions, and so forth. With that high end, because you want growth, you want it to look green, and you want a certain amount of health and promoting strong cells, etc. Right. Again, a high, look, you see it started, it have Technigrow. Remember Technigrow selling all different types of fertilizer. So they have a super starter plant food, 94515. The 45 is basically because they want it, it's a starter, so they want plenty roots to grow. So it has a high P value. Yeah, the same thing like this one here. So they call it all-purpose. But what you're trying to do is to get more roots, but you balance it with a certain amount of N and K. All right. So again, look at it again. They call same Technigrow, same company, and they have lawn and turf plant food at 24,715. 24 because you want your lawn to look green and nice. You want it to grow fast and so forth. So use a high N. All right, but you still want some roots. And you still want some K to give it as what you call body, right? In better cell structures. So you have a high N and a relatively high K, but a low P. And you see they call it lawn and turf thing. You call lawn, yeah. What color you want your lawn to look? Not green. So that's why they have a high N value. So in buying fertilizers, what you need to look at is the numbers. Not because you fell in the garden shop, say, hey, this good for tomato and that good for okra and that good for orchids and so forth. It's, you have to as long as you understand the numbers, then you buy the fertilizers accordingly. Okay. The fertilizing, if you have to fertilize, you fertilize like about 1 to 2 teaspoons away from the center of away from the plant itself. Because remember when you have a plant, and most of us will know you have plants in pots and then the pots become root bound because that's all it is outside, closer to the inner part of the pot itself. So that is where the roots are, and that is where you'll fertilize in a pot. You don't fertilize too close to the stem itself. Okay. And the same thing like if you have it on a bed, you could fertilize the whole length of the bed. Now in tomatoes, it's important in tomatoes to have calcium. If you don't have calcium, the bottom of the tomatoes begin to get rotten. And that is what is called blossom end rot. So throughout the life of the tomatoes and peppers, make sure that you have calcium in the mixture all the time. Some people, eggshells have calcium, bones have calcium, so like eggshells, people take it and grind it up as fine as possible and spread it around the plants, right, to help calcium in the soil so you won't get this problem of blossom end rot. Watering your plants. All right. Some vegetables require more water. You now put in once along the flowering and the fruiting, you need to have more water because that's when they're actually going to start to fruit. So the fruits will need water. The plant need more water. Actively growing, if it's in direct sunlight all the time, you need to keep the soil moist. And sandy soils, because remember sandy soils, the water will just drain away. Those requiring less water, you know, put them out. If it's in a shaded or not too windy area, right? And those in an almost ideal soil, like a good soil mix, you really don't need that amount of watering because the soil will remain moist in a good soil mix all the time. In a shaded or not too windy area, the wind won't be causing evaporation to take place so that the soil will remain relatively moist. If you have a problem on both sides, if you're underwater and if you overwater. If you're underwater, you'll have slow growth and the leaves will look like translucent. You could actually look through the leaves. You might have premature dropping of the flowers and leaves and fruits, and the edges of the plant might become brown or curled. If you overwater, the roots will rotten away, right? And everything will fall off. The ground will look very soggy. You might see moss in the soil if you have the plants in containers, right? The soil will stay moist. Now, if you have these in your backyard and you're planting on the ground, and it's rainy season right now and plenty rain falling, okay? What you need to do is to make sure that you have good drainage. And also too, if you have a lot more wind in the area, so that the drainage will get rid of the water and the wind will help speed up the evaporation rate and keep the soil relatively dry. But if we have like some days, like a few days ago when you had rain for 2, 3, 4 days, there's very little that we could do about it. How much water to give a plant? Now you can always tell that just by how the plant's looking. You need whether they're looking droopy or they're looking wilted, you know it needs water. It depends on the type of plant. Like pak choi, for example, as soon as it doesn't get, or lettuce, soon as it don't get enough water, you'll see the leaves start to wilt, right? The stage of growth of the plant, right? So generally speaking, when the plants begin to flower, the flowering type plants, when they begin to flower and fruit, they need more water. The location of the plant, as we spoke about, the soil type we spoke about, the time of the day or the year will depend. So in the dry season, you might need more water. In the rainy season, you might need more wind in the area. So these are the things you need to take into consideration when you're doing your backyard garden. If you water in the containers, right? The water in containers, if the soil appears dry or the soil is moving away, all the soil is moving away from the container itself, right? You need to wet it until the water runs right through so you could actually soak it properly, right? If you tap the pot and it sounds dull, the soil below is moist because remember the top might be looking dry, but down below might be moist. If it sounds hollow, it needs watering. Another little thing you could do is take a little piece of stick or something and put it into the soil and pull it back out. And where it is moist, you'll see the moisture remaining on the piece of stick so that you know that even though the top is looking dry, where the roots are is still moist. In open areas, again, If the soil appear to be cracking or the plants looking wilted, then you apply sufficient moisture. Water should look relatively moist. As I said before, if it's in the rainy season, there's very little you can do because it's rainy season, right? The drainage is what is important. To make sure that whatever water is there drains out very easily. Again, why you need to keep the plants moist is because, especially like tomatoes, if you allow the tomato, remember tomato have a very thin skin, huh? So if you allow it to dry, the soil to dry out too much, and then all of a sudden you give it too much water, what happens is that the cells in the fruit itself, like tomato, the cells in the skin of the tomato, right, take up water too quickly, and it what they call end up in this the fruit cracking. Right? So by keeping the moisture content not too wet, not too dry, you'll always have you won't have a problem. But if you just leave it dry out and all of a sudden you give it too much water, this is what will happen. It will crack. For those of you all, you might want to just go on Amazon and get what they call a soil moisture meter. And this is basically what a meter, and a little set of numbers from 1 to 10 on top here, so. And you just stick it into the soil. And if the soil is moist, it will say 10 too wet. If it's dry, 0 too dry. Very simple and straightforward. And they have, if you have to get one with like about, I would say between 24 and 36 inches stem, right? Because that's normally the depth of the roots. Weeds, pests, and diseases. Now, since it's backyard gardening you're doing, and most of you all are young and flexible and everything, try not to use any chemicals or any sort of weedicides, you know. Just actually just spend a little time and just take all the weeds naturally with your hand, right? That's physical control, or you could use a mulch. In the case of the mulch, put the mulch around the plants, and that will conserve the moisture in the root zone or the spacing of the plants. If you put the plants properly spaced, it will, when it matures, it will actually cover the soil and prevent weeds from growing. Some people, what they do is like they shred paper and they put the paper on the ground to help prevent the weeds from growing up, or like pieces of cardboard or something like that, which will prevent weed growth. And the cardboard and the paper will keep moist, so it acts like a sort of mulch. So for backyards, try and focus on hand removal or mulching rather than going for any sort of weedicide. Because with the weedicide, the plant could take it up. The plant take it up, it goes into the fruit, then we eat the fruit, and then we get weedicides in our body and problems later on in life. There are two basically types of weedicide. You have what they call a contact weedicide and a systemic weedicide. A contact weedicide is something like gramoxone. Whatever it touches, it will kill. And it's like you spray gramoxone on a nice hot day. Within half an hour, all the leaves will start to turn yellow and it will dry up. Now the systemic, on the other hand, what happens is that the plants take it up. It goes down to the roots begin to die, and then eventually the whole plant dies. So with a systemic, it normally takes about 5 to 10 days before you see any signs of the plant dying. Whereas with gramoxone, sometimes within half an hour, you would see all the leaves dying, but the roots will not die. So within a month or so, it would the weeds will catch back up. Now, hopefully, God willing, next year, a lot of these weedicides will be banned in the country. Gramoxone, for example, I know will be banned next year, yeah, because of it being carcinogenic, causing cancer. Okay. So, and we have to wait and see what will happen with a lot of farmers who depend on these chemicals in order to produce their crops. Right? If you have pests and diseases, whether it's a disease or pest, first of all, try to identify what it is. Okay? And use natural methods, what I indicated earlier on, use marigolds. Okay? Again, if you go to the Ministry of Agriculture website on publications, there's a publication on pest and disease management, and they have a whole set of mixtures like garlic and what's the other one? Big leaf or Spanish thyme or pudina and peppers, and you mix it up. They tell you how to do it. So that slide will explain all these things to you. Same thing like a fungus. With the fungus problem, what you need to do is either cut it out, and good air movement is what is important, because fungus likes a moist environment. And you really don't want a moist environment because, as I said, good air movement in your space. When you look at in the beginning, when we spoke about letting wind pass through the canopy of the plants to reduce evapotranspiration, that will reduce the fungal problems. Right? Now, if you have to collect a sample because you're not certain what it is, collect a sample early in the morning, use a Ziploc bag, place a piece of moist tissue or piece of Bounty in the bag, carefully remove the affected part, put it inside the bag and seal it, and write down all the basic information. What plant it is, what part of the plant, what stage of growth, if you use any pesticide, any other information, and keep it in a cool environment until you carry it to the agro shop or to the plant pathologist or entomologist, right? And they will be able to tell you exactly what it is and what how you could control it. But as I said, the ministry publication on pests and diseases, management of pests and diseases, will give you local remedies, what you could use at home rather than going and spending money and buying a whole gallon bottle or something you might only use once. Just going to go through very quickly all the different types of insects. This is like the mealybug, what it will look like. Then there are the aphids. You normally see the aphids, they're normally the growing point, and then a mass of small little insects, or a scale insect, which is normally brown in color. Now the thing with a scale insect is that the insect lives under the scale. They come like an armor. So you have to use like a systemic insecticide. So when they suck the sap, insect suck the sap, then it would the insect itself will die. You know, mites is one of the main problem on the coconuts right now. And it's really a spider, and the leaves turn yellow. When they suck out the sap of a plant, you see the leaves turning yellow. You all know batjacks. Batjack is eating a semicircle. So you see that semicircular pattern, you know it's a batjack. If you have natural predators like a ladybug, like these ladybugs here, do not spray because the spray will kill both the good and the bad insects. Sooty mole, when the insect passes waste matter, it has something like cane trash on the leaves, that sort of blackish fungus. So if you control the insect, you will control the sooty mole problem. Again, with the sooty mole, what you need is to actually cut off those pieces of plants, put it in a garbage bag for the dump. Right? Or if you have to spray it, it's better to cut it off because prune back the plant to some extent and let new growth arise, rather than going to buy a whole set of insecticide and a fungicide mixture to control it. You have these leaf miners. Sometimes you see on the plant itself a trail. So it's really the caterpillar. Remember, the insect have egg, larva, pupa, adult. So the larva or caterpillar stage, remember, when you look at a leaf, you know a leaf have a top side and an underside. So you know how thin the leaf is. And the insect is living between the top and the bottom surfaces of the leaf. And as it moves around feeding, right, it leaves these trails. You have to use something like a systemic insecticide or natural insecticide to control it. Then you have white flies. You must know white flies. As soon as you tap the leaves, you're going to see a whole set of little flies flying and fluttering all over the place. This is easily controlled with soap water. The other thing too is when you're spraying your plants for insecticide, always try to get the spray on the underside of the leaves, because that is where the insects tend to live generally. So you spray the top of the leaves, everything looking good, you feel you give it a good spray, but the insect living on the underside, and then you end up with the same problem. Okay, they have caterpillars, like in the corn, you see a whole set of caterpillars. Slugs is one of the problems you're having, right? You use the appropriate slug bait. The problem is with the slug bait or the snail bait is that they are what you call attractants. They attract slugs. They attract snails, right? So you might have it in a yard or coming from by the neighbor, and they like moist environments, and you put the bait, and then all of a sudden you find that you have more slugs in the yard because the bait is an attractant. It attracts it, and then it kills them. Now you have to be very careful, especially with the African snail nowadays, but it's kind of almost rampant in the country. One of the nature is very mysterious and interesting, because what happens is with the African snail, once the snail knows that it's going to die, right, it releases all the eggs, right? So what you have to do is, if possible, try to use the bait and don't touch the snail with your hand at all, because you could end up with meningitis. Like a shovel or something, and put it in a bag, or just seal the bag, and then put it in the dump to go down into the rubbish dump. So when you look at this plant, for example, you look at the upper surface of the leaves, and you see all these yellow things coming up. You might assume that is a fertilizer problem you're having. When you turn over the leaves, on the underside of the leaves, you see a whole set of insects being built up. Okay, so it's important to look at both the on top of the leaves and the underside of the leaves when it comes to pests and diseases. And as I said, when you spray, always try to get a spray to the underside of the leaves, because that's where most of the insects tend to live. In the pumpkins, the squash, the watermelons, you have basically two fungal problems. You have what you call downy mildew, where you see yellow spots on the leaves, or powdery mildew, it's looking whitish, like powder. That's the difference between both of them, and you just need to use an appropriate fungicide. Anthracnose is one of the main problems of most fruits and vegetables. These little black spots, as you see. Again, the important to keep it to keep the place as dry as possible. The celery, the leaf spot, or the lettuce, the bacterial leaf spot. Again, when you're buying a plant from the nursery, as we spoke of earlier, make sure you get a healthy looking plant, because you might buy a celery and have a little few spots on it, and then you bring it home by you, right? And your environment is ideal, so you're going to end up with the celery, or mostly the celery and the parsley, a whole set of little spots, and the lettuce, the same thing too. So always look for very clean and healthy plants. The tomato, kind of wilting on the tomato. Okay, you see just by the colors, you know that something is wrong. Anytime you see these things happening on your plants, take out the whole plant and put the plant in a garbage bag and get rid of it. Because if you only leave it, it's going to just multiply and spread to all your other plants. Right? It's like a bacterial wilting of the plant itself. Too much of water, moisture, and all of a sudden, the whole plant wilts. One of the ways you could, like in cucumbers, right? One of the ways you could do it to find out whether it's a bacteria having is to have a little jug of water, like a beaker, cut the plant, cut the fruit, right? And just dip it into the water and you'll see all the bacteria oozing out. Then you know it's a bacterial problem. Right? So what you need to do is actually to try and as soon as the plant's looking like it wilting or anything happening, dig it out, take it out, and get rid of it immediately. In the case of lettuce, this is what they call bolting, and the lettuce start to flower, etc. That means it passed. When I say pass, you went beyond the 4 to 5 weeks, or if the place is too hot, right, the lettuce will just keep growing very, very quickly. It cannot tolerate our temperatures. That is called bolting. Harvesting. Harvest early in the morning and determine the maturity by the size, color, age, and the gentle touch. One of the ways, one of the best ways to determine when to pick a fruit, it comes only through experience. You know, now is the correct time in order to harvest the fruit. Use a clipper or a nipper and try to keep a piece of the stem attached to the vegetable. If you remove the stem, that area where you move it is a soft spot, and that is where the fungus will enter very quickly as it's moist and rotten the fruit. So always try to keep it with a piece of stem on it. If you're cutting things like celery, parsley, chive, take out the outermost leaves. So you allow the younger or center leaves to develop to maturity. Just don't cut it for cutting its sake because you want a piece of celery or you want a piece of parsley. Right? Remove it carefully. Right? The outermost ones, look at the plant, remove the outermost ones. So you allow the center plants to grow up and it will. Celery and parsley can last for sometimes 6-7 months. Yeah. Let's generally, I want to go through ripening is the process by which the vegetables attain their desired flavor, quality. Plant is getting ripe, the mango ripening, the tomato ripening, and so forth. It's an indicator that the plant is ready to be harvested. And different crops have different levels and different times of maturity. We all know that. Okay. So the ripening is the process by which the plants attain their desired flavor, quality, color, palatability, and so forth. Yeah. And the crop is ready to be harvested or picked. Now, fruits and vegetables are divided into 2 categories. Climateric, meaning the fruits and vegetables will ripen after it harvests. It gets softer and generally sweeter. Non-climateric means that once you pick them, they will never ripen again. Okay, so that's the difference between the 2 of them. So things like banana, you buy a banana, you pick it, it will ripen on your tomato, plantain, cotton, figs, and things, it will ripen. The other things like a melon or okra, peppers, cucumbers, once you pick them, they're not going to ripen any further. Okay, the leafy crops, they're not going to mature any further. You pick it, that's it, it's non-climateric. Right? So, you know, it's very interesting because a lot of people buy strawberries, right? And for the strawberries to come from abroad to come to Trinidad, let's say leave in Florida, from the farm in Florida to the port, then a container to ship it down to Trinidad, then it reach the port in Trinidad, and from the port in Trinidad, it goes to the supermarket or the wherever. Right? That's at least a week. So 99.9% of the time when you buy strawberries in Trinidad, they don't taste good because they had to pick them long before in order for them to travel to Trinidad, to reach Trinidad. Right? So some fruits will ripen and some will never ripen. Okay, so you need to pick them at the correct stage. Okay, it's like in tomatoes, like they have different stages in tomatoes. They have the green, The surface is reddish. You call it breaker, 30% red, 60% red, about 90% light red, and completely red. So it is 100%. So this is whole stages of ripening of a tomato. Yeah. So you might want to start to turn a little color. You might want to pick it because the tomatoes will ripen after you pick them. So you pick it and you could leave it home on a tabletop or counter or wherever, and it will eventually ripen after a few days. Okay, but the other thing, you pick an okra and you leave it on the counter, nothing will happen to it. It's just remain an okra. Home safety. We all have our health challenges. So your age, your vision, your hearing, sense of balance, if you're on some form of medication, the environmental conditions, etc. Take these into account when you're doing your backyard gardening. Eh? Don't work in a very hot day because you might get dehydrated. And if you get dehydrated, drink water. Do not drink a carbonated drink. A carbonated drink is designed to dehydrate you. So the more Coca-Cola or Pepsi or some chubby or some kind of thing you drink, is the more you want, right? And that's not helping you at all at all. So know your little weaknesses or your concerns, right? When you're doing your gardening. If you have children around you, right? Show them the dangers, set the examples, maybe have an area for them to play with, have an emergency plan in case something goes wrong. So do not allow the children to use tools or pesticides or working areas or on ladders, anything like that at all at all. Remember, it's your child and you won't like anything to happen in the garden. As we indicated earlier, if you have tools, make sure the tools not all over the place, right? Because you leave the fork or the rake with the prongs up and the child just run across accidentally, then you know what could happen. So safety is important. Yeah. If you have a container, use a container, what they call triple rinse. Rinse it out properly. At the end of it, take it and cut it up so nobody could reuse it in the future. If you have a glass container or a metallic container, what you need to do is put it like in a crocus bag and smash it up so that nobody could use it. Remember, these things, if you leave these things, a container with chemicals in them, and you leave them, remember they're going down to the dump, eh? And the dump have businessmen down there. Okay, so you never could tell if it could come back up into let's say the food chain somewhere along the line. Okay? So always destroy it properly. Okay, very briefly, looking at the time, I'm going to show you all a whole set of pictures of where you can grow your vegetables. You could use containers, right? Plastic containers, or they call this like a cherry pot, I think they call it. So the main plant will go in the center, and in the little pockets, they use like celery and chive and parsley. We all have these blue containers. You might want to put a piece of wood on a block so it wouldn't, with the soil, it kind of make it bulge, to prevent it from bulging. In this container like this, if you cut it this way horizontally, you could try even sweet potatoes in it because the sweet potatoes, the roots do go really deep. If you cut it the other way, you could try planting maybe cassava because the cassavas tend to be a little longer. You have containers. These are like paint containers, paint buckets. We had a lot of success in them with pak choy. And again, this was some pak choy. So if you're going to use pak choy, try and separate it so you could walk in between and take out any weeds or anything in the plants itself. Depending on where you live, you might use the pigtail buckets. And that will be ideal for like pimentos and hot peppers, okras, tomatoes, sweet peppers, because they need more root room. This was a project I did with some kids some years ago. and kind of recycling. So you just fill up the tiles with soil, and they planted either lettuce and tomatoes, etc., in the containers. You might do a grow box with blocks. You could put the paper to prevent weeds from coming up. Or like make a concrete block structure. Again with blocks. Again, this is a good size, because if you know any guys working here, you could always clean the plants from this side, and you go on this side, you clean the plants on that side. In any grow box, what you can do is like any holes of the blocks, you could put in celery and chive and parsley, because they hardly have any roots in any case. But the bigger plants, you could put it in the center of the grow box itself. And if you're planting, depending on the lettuce variety, instead of planting it in a straight line, you plant it in a kind of triangle, right? And this way you get more plants per area rather than in a straight line. Okay. In this case, what this person did was like they have the beds here, and in between the little combat beds, the furrows, they put all this stuff like the dry leaves, etc. So you plant on top here. And the next time around, what they will do, when they're forking it up and digging it over, this will become the cupboard, because it will have a lot of organic matter here, and this will become the furrow, so you throw all this stuff in here. Okay, so you're doing a kind of little rotation. Like a plant, you could use wood or something, box board, and plant a whole different types of crops. Okay. This was a project that was done with up in Malabar, Arima side. Yeah, grow boxes. Or some people, what they do in their grow boxes, they put a piece of PVC and they just put holes in the PVC pipe itself. So you just have to turn on the tap, rather than having to take a watering can and hose and wet everything. Yeah, like here, so they put the smaller ones in the you'll still have to wet it, because they have the smaller plants in the holes of the blocks. Right. These bottles, plastic bottles, hang it up against the wall or your fence. Again, basically with celery and chive and parsley and those with very little roots. Right? Or you could use a guttering, attach it to your wall. And if you're going to use guttering, just put it at a slight angle so the water will run out, rather than settle in the whole length of the guttering. Or you could turn the bottles upside down. Again, you put holes at the bottom here. I just put one hole here so the water just drip off. Or you could build an A-frame, cut the containers differently, and you can have a whole set of crops. Again, as I said earlier on, what you could do is think of it as a business. All right, so you could sell a whole set of celery or chive or parsley or lettuce or whatever it is. Okay. You might want to use like hanging baskets for some of the crops, depending on what space you have at home. For those of you all who are doing hydroponics, right, you could set up your own little system at home. This one is a dripper where you have to use a solution. This person, what she did was use like the same guttering, and she used ordinary soil, and she does only kale. Like every Saturday morning, she sells her kale in the Diego Martin Farmers Market. Yeah. Okay. Again, you don't really need a liquid solution. You use ordinary soil or good soil mix, and you have your celery and chive growing. Or you could use pallets. Yeah. Fill it up with soil, and you have your plants growing in the area of the pallet, in the spaces of the pallet. For those of you who might be physically challenged, you could build containers, but remember when you're doing, if you're going to do this, do the container. First of all, you sit down in a wheelchair, so you could get the correct height from which to work. Yeah? Or you might just put a lip on the container so the person could sit down on top of there and do the gardening. Or you could use these type of boxes, so you don't have to bend down. Those of us who might have back problems or that sort of thing, everything in containers, raised containers that you would call them. If you want to do something like cucumbers and you don't want them touching the ground, you build a little frame and you use like chicken wire or BRC. And from that, you could actually grow the cucumbers so they won't touch the ground and get any fungus or anything. Or you build a little frame or a stand and you use fisherman line in nylon, right? Up here so you could support the plants will grow up, and you could have a whole set of different patterns you could use. Some people use like fisherman net or something like a netting and let it grow in the netting. This lady and her husband, they take PVC and they made a little greenhouse and they have the plants growing in the greenhouse. Or you could do like vertical gardening. You fill it up with soil and put like elbows, fill it up with soil and you put like a celery inside in the elbows. This lady in Waterfield, she had growing kale and she was doing the different types of kale, the green, I can't remember. This one is purple, I think this one is called, I can't remember the names of them right now. But what she did on the ground here, this white thing that you see on the ground here is actually crocus bags to prevent the weeds from coming up. Yes, you have simple things. You just have to be, sorry. Okay. This is like, as I said before, you could think of what you're going to do as a backyard garden, do it as a business, and this fella have his a top, here build up the top of his house here, but he put a whole set of bags and he have sweet peppers growing. Okay, pure business. Okay, some of the containers, like for example, like a rooftop garden, you have the blue containers we spoke about. Remember, fig and plantain don't already have that amount of roots, huh? So you could grow it in very large containers, like a roof garden. Yeah. This lady, she had problems with iguanas and birds. So we did a little frame, a little structure, and then covered it over with, since you can't get the bird netting, she used fisherman netting. Right, so if you have a plant growing inside here on the ground, at least you don't have the problems with birds and iguanas getting in again. Right, you could be very creative, and a little shoe bag, you have nothing to do with them. Instead of throwing them out, you just fill up the holes with some soil and you're good to go. All right. Or you might be a little artistic and want a little landscape vegetable garden. So when you look down at it, you have a nice little pattern. So in summary, begin with a vision, what you like to achieve, write down a plan of all what you need to get, look at all the resources and choices and how much money you have, implement it, keep monitoring and evaluating what you're doing and keep records all along as you go along. Thank you for your time and attention. So I think we just have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. One at a time, please.
Yes. So those with questions, Sister Gabrielle will manage this session and call your name and you give your question. And if you have any questions that you wrote down during this session, Sister Gabrielle.
If there are too many questions, what you could do is just make a list and send it to me. I think Leon has my email address and I could always answer them back.
Okay, so we have a hand raised, Brian. Brian, go ahead.
Yes. I have a question. It's about, right now I'm planting pawpaw. I have a field of pawpaw, just about 300. And I'm picking the first set of picking. This is the third time I picked. That was yesterday. And it developed a fungus.
Yeah.
And well, today I've been hearing a lot of things, what to do. Well, I sprayed with fungicide for the first time,
Yeah.
and it has been working. But still, I noticed that there are some that would got a little black spot, and then once the fruit is ripe and that black spot is there, it turns into a bigger one before it's well ripe.
Okay. That black spot is anthracnose, and you'll definitely need a fungicide. Now, for everybody really, before you actually start into the production of any crop, right, do your homework first, right? Find out about the crop, pests and diseases and things like that. Now, in the case of the pawpaw, right, what spacing you use between the plants?
10 feet.
Okay. Is the area very windy?
Yes, it's windy.
Okay. The ground cover, is it very weedy, moist?
No, the ground is clean. It's on a slope, and
Yeah.
it's sand soil. So no matter how much rain may fall, it easily is the water disappears very quick.
And fertilizing?
Well, I fertilize. I only use in the beginning. I use root and salt.
Yeah. Root and soil. When you say the root and soil, what do you use? 12, 24, 12?
Yes.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
And then when it start the flowers, I use salt recommended from the
when it start the flower, what fertilizer you use? What are the numbers?
I can't remember, but I think it's
most likely they give you anything, they would have given you something like a 12, 12, 17.
12, 12, 17, exactly so.
Right here.
That's all I use.
Okay, now remember the blue corn and the blue soil comes in two types.
Blue corn, yes, yes.
Blue corn. Now there's a blue corn what it is back off, right? And that one only have 12, 12, 17. There's also a blue corn, a black corn in a different container, right? And it has 12, 12, 17, 2 and micronutrients.
Yeah.
So what you need is that one. Okay. And you need that, I would say, like once every 2 months.
All right.
Now the reason being, yeah, and spraying. Have you sprayed the plant, the top of the growing point? Is it okay?
Yes. For the first time I sprayed, and that's when because I encountered the black spots, I sprayed the field last week. And well, it's 2 different fields they planted at different times. So about yesterday I sprayed the next field.
What is sprayed with? The fungicide?
Yes, a fungicide, and I put a little malathion. Very little. Teaspoonful to 5 gallons. And
all right, one of the purposes of you have to be careful, huh? The malathion, if you spray malathion, you're not supposed to pick the fruits for about 7 to 10 days, huh?
exactly so.
Okay, so the malathion is ready to prevent the insect from causing the top of the plant, what they call the bunchy top problem.
Yes.
The fungicide is to control the spots on the fruit itself.
Yes.
Okay? What you need to also do is every time you use a fungicide, rotate the fungicides. So if you use fungicide A this time, next time use fungicide B, next time use the fungicide C, and then you could come back to A. If you keep using the same fungicide all along, all the time, the fungus builds up a resistance to the fungus. So you keep spraying the same fungicide, and then the fungus will be happy. They're living happy because they have a resistance in it. Because remember, they multiply very fast. Yeah? So rotate the fungicides. Leave your number, and you could call me at 794. I don't want this one person. 794 0992.
0992.
Yeah.
And what about the fruits, those that
Let us. I'll have to. It will take a lot more explaining to do, but let us give somebody else a chance because we're looking at time now. You could always call me afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Carl, we have 2 questions in the chat. Someone is asking for herbs. What is the ratio of sharp sand to other soil?
I would use like about 1.5 the quantity. Like remember we said you're using one construction bucket of soil, 1 construction bucket of peat moss, 1 construction bucket of manure. I use like a bucket and a quarter of the sharp sand.
Okay.
What you really want is drainage, yeah? The quicker the water run out, the better for the plant. It helps keep the soil relatively moist. So long as the soil has organic matter in it, it will remain moist. You don't want the soil to get too wet and too heavy, and also the plants too crowded. Because once the plants get crowded, you're going to get a fungal problems coming up.
She's also asking, is it absolutely necessary to use fertilizers? Well, she said salt, as commonly said. Are there organic substitutes?
Yeah, there are organic substitutes. I cannot remember the most. They have so much on the market right now, right? I think if she goes to the organic shop or to the agricultural shop, sit down and read through the labels properly before you decide on what you're going to buy. Okay, because they have a whole set. One of the more common ones is the neem, N-E-E-M, the neem products.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, there are a lot. Everybody has some new one on the market every Monday morning.
Okay. Okay, another question. What can be done to prevent worms or insects damaging fruit at the point of flowering? Example, West Indian cherry and guava.
West Indian cherry and guava. Okay, remember the insect goes through a life cycle: egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Okay, the insect lays the egg in the fruit, right? It grows up into the caterpillar, and then it falls down into the caterpillar, falls, and it goes into the ground and pupates, and then it goes back into the adult stage. So egg, larva, pupa, and adult. Pupa is normally in the ground. One of the things you need to do is to keep the ground as clean as possible. Right, so any fruits fall on the ground, try and take it up. One thing you can do. Secondly, like especially in the case of the cherry tree, because of the amount of branches and leaves and things like that, as soon as the fruits begin to let's say like before, what stage you could use that one? A little, when they're still green, very green and immature, you need to spray the whole tree. Give the tree a good spraying, plus the sanitation. In the case of the guava, they have what they call is a fruit fly, what causes the problem. And you have like what they call a fruit trap. A fruit trap is a chemical whereby the insects are, the trap releases a scent, and the insects are attracted to that scent, and it goes into the trap, and it gets trapped and it drowns in the trap itself. So you have to look for a fruit, what they call a fruit trap. And I think they sell them most places. If you go and look and just Google it, fruit traps, and what to use, and they show you how to make one. So you could do it at home. And I'm not certain what chemicals they use inside the trap to attract the insects.
Yeah, they also have pheromone traps, and I think some of the organic shops, especially Prova, they supply pheromone traps. It's the
Right.
You would know that pheromone is the scents that the insects release. So it's put into the trap to attract particular insects. So there'll be different types of pheromone traps.
Yeah, the pheromone
Yeah.
traps, some of the pheromone traps are like it's like some insects, what they do when they come to mating time, they give off a certain scent. And that scent is, the trap itself has that scent. So all the males are attracted to that scent, and tough luck.
Someone sent me a message asking if you can say what is the relevance of planting by the moon.
I respect everyone who follows like the McDonald Almanac and things like that. Okay. There's some degree of validity about it, which haven't experimented with. But if somebody believes in the McDonald Almanac and planting the moon and above ground and below ground, they can go ahead. I respect their position, but I'm not. I normally put down my crops when I get time.
Exactly. Okay.
Right?
Someone is asking what can you do to what can be done for slugs?
I think I would call a slug and snail bait. All right, the same thing I just indicated earlier on, where you use an attractant, you spread the you sprinkle the bait, and the slugs will be attracted to it and they die. Slugs generally tend to like very moist, wet, damp environments. So it might be difficult because your area might be dry, but your neighbor next door, their place wet and moist and things like that. So you just have to use the bait. Some people say you could use beer, they're attracted to beer, right? But they didn't tell me whether it's Heineken or Carol. All right. So I really can't, I really don't know. I never tried it. Okay. Again, a lot of these things the ministry publications have some of those things, or you could Google slug control, how to control slugs, or how to control snakes, and they have all sorts of different little remedies you might want to try at home.
Yeah, slugs could be a big problem, like people who are cultivating big acreages of lettuce, people with big acreages of watercress. I don't know if you ever bought lettuce in the supermarket. You take it home, put it out in the bowl, and realize there are slugs between the stems. That's because sometimes you could have a field that has an abundance of slugs. One of the natural control measures, if you have ducks, you release some ducks in the watercress field. The problem is the ducks would eat the slugs in the watercress field, but in the lettuce field, the ducks will also feed on your lettuce. So there's a give and take situation. You could use the slug baits too. One of the preventative measures is to try to keep your field dry if it is a lettuce field or cabbage or pak choy. I mean, once you're looking to get away from serious chemicals, you have to look at other means of controlling your pests. You know, I think this is what God intended for us to learn as we conduct our agricultural practices, Carl.
Yeah, but
We're not,
let's see.
we're not put here to be just idle.
But
So
all,
different people observe different things, practice different things, and probably report back to us as groups. What is working for you? Yep. I think it
yeah,
is all about that.
yeah, but also too, you have to remember that's why they do like mixed cropping. So instead of having one crop, you have several different things planted together.
Excellent idea.
So that sometimes it's sent from, like, some people use a lot of like the Spanish thyme, the big leaf thyme as they call it, or pudina. They put that among the plants because the scent of it throws off a lot of insects. Or even like the on the ground using like white plastic or white paper or something. When the sun rays hit plastic white, color white, and it reflects, right? It throws off the insect whole how trying to explain it. It disorients them. Okay, so they kind of stay away from those environments. You see, agriculture is a learning process, huh? You have to keep observing all the time.
Cynthia Manzano, I think I saw your hand earlier on. Do you have a question?
Yes, concerning your cutting in your kitchen. Is, yes,
Concerning what?
any other, like
Can you
you're in the
repeat?
kitchen and you're cleaning your vegetables. And me?
I'm not
Could you
here.
repeat yourself again? Could you repeat again?
Jenny?
Little better.
Yes, like you're in the kitchen and cleaning tomatoes or what have you, and you use that to plant. Will it come?
You mean the tomato seeds?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, it depends, right? Because most of the seeds most of the tomatoes that we have now is not like what you call long-time tomatoes. You buy a tomato and then you plant the seed and you get a new plant. Most of them now tend to be hybrids. And what happens is that when you cut the tomato, if you get seeds, you could try and see if the seeds will germinate. Or sometimes you cut tomato, you have no seeds in it at all, or the seeds are not viable. But if you get a natural, I want to use a natural or traditional type tomato, the seeds will come. But you could try it and see. Just keep it on a piece of when you cut it off, put it on a piece of tissue or bounty or something, let it dry out a little bit, and then just sew it into a shallow container. And when it germinates, then you just plant it out.
I'm seeing Ava Haynes. Ava, go ahead. Ava, you can unmute.
I just want to find out. I plant my seeds, sow my seeds, and in the trays, but I want to find out if you have to put it outside in the sun or you have to leave it in a cool place.
You have to leave it in a cool place, because remember, it's a new plant, and you put it out in the sunlight, it's going to die. It cannot handle the heat. So you have to keep it in a relatively, when I say cool, I think a covered place. You need to keep it in a covered place so you controlling the watering, right? When they begin to grow, let's say about 1 inch or 2 or 30 centimeters or so, then you could gradually introduce it to sunlight.
Well, I thought you have to, it want heat, so I put it out in the sun the seed button. So
You forget the commandment, thou shalt not kill.
On that note, Carl, let me say that you did a wonderful job. I think
Yes, you did.
we have
I
been
forget not to
enthralled,
die.
been captivated by your information. It's amazing how much you have been able to put into this hour and a half for us. I know
Yes.
that you will have some questions coming your way. Look out for it. I just thought I'd comment a bit on the purple with the anthracnose problem. If your field has had a crop before, you have to ensure that you clean up that field properly so that you don't have a spillover into the new crop. Anthracnose spores have a way of hanging around, and they could hang around any plants you have in the field. And we know we want to minimize the amount of chemical usage, but it may be useful early in the life of the crop, just before maturing, around the 11th month, to spray with a systemic fungicide. So it begins to protect the plant from there. So by the time it begins to fruit, the anthracnose spores the activity of spores would have been grossly reduced so that you don't have a high incidence as soon as it begins to blossom and bear. I realize a lot of purple farmers are fighting with the anthracnose, and keeping the field clean is very important. Know too that if your neighbor is planting purple and he has an anthracnose problem, the spores, when they dry in the dry season, blow across to your field and they wait for the dewdrops to germinate. And it's looking for good food, and your purple might be just good food. And we could go on like this with a lot of conversations.
That's one. That's one.
Carl wants to just tighten
The,
up a loose end before he leaves us tonight.
with,
Carl?
with respect to the same purple, in your planning phases, plan your field in such a way that you have them in a grid or blocks. Because what could be happening is that, as Leon said, you're moving from one field to the next field, your boots and your clothes could transport the fungus from plot A to plot B to plot C. Right? So you have to be very careful so that in some farm, I know some farms, like in some farms, what they do, to go from plot A to plot B or to field A to field B, they have like foot baths. So you wash off your foot before you go to a different field. You see?
If I may say one thing,
Yes.
you spoke about something to get rid of the insects. What name you called it, Ranger?
I was talking about the fungus and a systemic
not that. You was
fungicide.
talking about the pheromones or something.
Oh yes, there are pheromone traps. Now, pheromone is the fancy name given to the chemicals.
What I'm saying is, why I say that is because I have a neighbor, and he showed me that, and it's a beetle that is infecting a lot of coconut trees. It doesn't affect mine because I'm close to him. So he has this thing in this bucket, and they would go in the bucket to feed, and they would drown and die. And he would show me 30, 40 of them in the bucket one time. And a lot of coconut farmers, they are talking about these that are destroying their field, and I think that that is the solution to it. Just wanted to get that in there.
That will not affect the purple.
Yeah.
No, not the purple.
It's just a different pheromone trap.
Yeah. So he built it for himself. He took a bucket and they sold him something, and he put it in the bucket, and the water is in there with some whatever solution, and they come and I think it's the male goes there, and he gets the male gets the scent of the female and goes there and dies.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
I just want to ask one question in the chat before we go. There's one last question here. Someone asks, how do I keep butterflies away from crops? They seem to be...
Butterflies?
Every crop seems to have a butterfly, eh? You have to decide which one you want to keep.
Yes, butterflies the person asks.
Yeah.
But how is it affecting the crop?
Well,
They eat my crops, especially my pimentos.
Butterflies?
It seems so. I don't see anything else.
all right. Carl, you want to make some comments, and I'll comment after.
No, I really can't. I really don't know.
So butterflies don't eat vegetables per se. What they do is they suck the juice from the flowers. What happens? There are specific butterflies which, during their life cycle from egg to larva, the larva would be responsible for damaging the crop. I'll give you two quick examples. There's an orange butterfly that you will see hanging around passion fruit. When they lay under the leaf and they hatch, you get these black, spiky looking, ugly caterpillars. They look like barbed wires, and they literally eat off your vine in a night. So that's one pest that attacks passion fruit, but it's not the butterfly doing the damage. It's the caterpillars. There's also one for cabbage. There's one that lays on tomatoes, and you get worms. Well, there's a fly for guava. There's that other fly for cherry. But there are a few butterflies around that present themselves as pests. Yeah? But the butterfly itself don't feed on the crop. If you see the butterfly around the pimentos, they're looking for sap, they're looking for nectar. They may even do some amount of pollination. All right? But as we get crop specific, I want to advise exactly what Carl said. You know, the Google is allowing us to see so many things and so many experiences that you could actually put yourself ahead. Once you're doing a crop, start researching it, pull up pests associated with the crops, and you will see more and more information. We urge you to share with us and with your community so that we could all be informed. I mean, locust is in the air now, eh? And I know there'll be a lot of conversations in the next few days about who's going to kill the locusts that are swarming in Rio Claro, Princestown. And that's a whole new ball game by itself, where they hatch, where they're heading to, what is their mission now as they travel, and that kind of thing, and the crops that they damage. But I want to say thanks again, Carl. I mean, this has been comprehensive. You don't even get this amount of information when you attend university. So you guys have gotten a mouthful. So, Carl, you don't have to stay on to the end with us. We're going to be taking up assignments now. Hopefully, we'll spend 10 minutes doing that, having group leaders report to us what you did. But let us give Carl a rousing round of applause and thank you, a virtual applause. Go to your reaction button, click on it, and you'll see applause. And that's, you can do it on air too.
While you do that, on behalf of the class, Carl, I want to thank you very much on behalf of the Princeton Seventh Adventist Church and our pastor, Pastor Vaughn Joshua. Thank you very much for your time. And I can tell you from the chat, lots of persons said, great presentation. Thank you for the information. They appreciate it. So thank you very much. And like Granger said, you gave your number. So expect to get lots of questions.
All right. Okay, thank you. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless.
Thank you again, Carl,
yes.
and to you too.
Goodbye.
Okay, folks, so group leaders, you will commandeering your teams. Who would be first to go? Just tell us what you did, what seeds you bought, how much seeds you got, the notes you took about sowing them, and have you seen any peeping out? What's the plan when they germinate? How many hundreds you're expecting? Tell us, please. Who'll be first?
Okay, so let's go with Vinton first. We're going in this order. Vinton, Stephen, Andy, Paul, Renata, Francis, and then Vaughn Joshua.
Gabby, you could have called somebody else, but I see you called me, I'll answer you. Because
Okay.
And I'll gladly answer in first because ours is the shortest report. We have only set our seeds. We bought our seeds and set them. Some folks were a little earlier than others, so that some have gone up like 1 inch. The name of the seed I really can't remember. I bought a can for $80, and we distributed them evenly, and I gave away the can, or throw it away rather. But I think there's only one person who indicated that some eyes were pushing above level. But otherwise, everybody else is more or less just set a day or two ago.
Vinton, is that lettuce?
No, that's pak choy.
Pak choy.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're
thank you,
talking, but I'm not here.
You're muted.
No, I know Granger was speaking, but I wasn't hearing him.
Okay, I
The
was
last
saying
part of it.
it might be useful to call the plant shop and ask them again the variety.
No,
And
I
get
could
it.
just go back and see I'll check on it. I know they can.
Yeah, take a picture of it. I mean, we need all of this
Yes.
in your report, you know.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
You wouldn't expect a lady to go to the hospital for a baby and come back home and say, well, I don't know, I just pick up a baby.
Some of them do. Some of them do.
All right. I remember my
I'll
mother
get
saying that many
the
years ago.
information surely. So,
All right. Okay. So do pictures of the seedlings as they develop. I want you to get it just like you take pictures of the babies, and then you see the dribble, and then you see a front tooth, you know, and the smile. Take some pictures. Let's see how that plant develops. Okay.
very well, sir.
That's the idea of the whole project, to get familiar with it. You could look at it and say, see that seedling? That is only 5 days old.
Right.
And you will reach a stage where you will keep a few just to see what happens with them, because you will say, see that seedling? That's already 3 weeks old. That I got it. Too old. Don't buy that. Right? That kind of thing.
Very well, sir. Appreciate.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Thank you, Brenton. Andy?
Good evening, everyone. Could I ask Wyndon? Wyndon, could you give the report since you were organizing everything? Wyndon?
No, Andy. Go ahead and report what you know.
All right. Well, Wyndon, he decided that he will organize everything and then distribute to us. The crop is pimento, and I know he has everything, and they were already sown. So just awaiting words from him for when we will go and pick up and then distribute the rest to the other folks outside of the group. So we have started.
Okay, so Andy, you're going by the orphan home to pick up some children, right?
Yeah.
No, but we want you to get closer. Be the father of the thing.
Okay.
All right. So what I would advise you do, and the others should do that too. It's a learning process for all of you. I want to encourage, and I know we have the COVID restrictions, but go visit, see the crop, know how old it is, take a picture of the box, ask him what time he watered it in the morning, how much water he used, if the water drain out whatever corner of the tray, and so on. So you get intimate with what's happening.
Okay, great. Will do.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, we're doing this right through for the course, eh? Okay, next.
Yep.
Okay, Andy Wyndon is no longer on. I guess that's why you didn't get the report from him. Okay, so we're moving on to Renata.
Hello, good night.
Good night, Renata.
My report is short as well. So far, we are not very far ahead. Some of us would have gotten our seeds and sown them. We decided to get our own seeds to sow. However, we didn't buy a tin. So that is where we're going right now. We're determining how we're going to plant them, whether in containers or in the ground afterward. So that's the point we're at.
Okay, Renata, I just want to comment on using the examples we all familiar with, because I take it we are all parents. I could tell from your voices that you are all parents.
No, she's not.
Parents sound a
Very
certain way.
She isn't a parent, but she's a teacher.
Okay, good. That's acceptable. Let me say, Renata, that in agriculture, there's a huge amount of planning that must take place. And because you're dealing with life and death, you must plan. So there's a statement someone had used in the past. With agriculture, timing is important. You miss one stage of your planning and you would be late with everything else. Take, for instance, if you had the seedlings ready, but you didn't prepare the soil, by the time you prepare the soil, the seedlings will be too late. If you prepare the soil and you prepare the planting box, but you didn't get the seeds, then your seedlings would keep you back because you don't have them. You can't put them in the ground. Let's suppose you had all of that correct and you planted it, but you didn't think about water. Whoa, I need to keep a container of water up the mountain there because I can't tote the bucket of water up the whole mountain every day. I need to keep a container up there and put a sheet of galvanized to fill with all the rain we're getting so that you could have the water when the crop needs it. If you don't, you get to the stage where the crop would perish because there's no water. And I could take you all the way to harvest time when you're ready to harvest and you said, whoa, I didn't think about getting a box to put all these tomatoes. Well, put them under the bed. A bowl in the kitchen, a bowl ain't enough. I only have 2 bowls in the house. That kind of scenario. I learned this lesson the hard way. I remember a group of us as students, we decided to do a barbecue. And we bought a whole lot of chickens, like 200 chickens, and we thought we'd sell tickets and sell barbecue. You know what happened in the end? We didn't sell out everything. And the chicken that was left couldn't fit in the fridge. We were in a lot of problems. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you skip a beat, you didn't plan it properly, and things begin to get away with your plan. All right, Renata? That's why we're sticking to having you tell us step by step what you're doing, what you're experiencing, what you're learning. Okay, next.
Pastor Joshua.
Hi, good night, everyone. So our group, we were to plant lettuce, and we tried sourcing the pan of lettuce seeds, the tin of lettuce seeds, but we didn't get them, but we found smaller packets of lettuce seed, and the group members found them at various agri shops where, because of the dynamic where some people are from, although we together in one group, some persons lives in slightly different areas. Persons were able to procure some of their seeds for themselves, and they would have begun. I just want to share with you, just because Sue said that we should show pictures, I would show what some of the group members would have shared with us in the group. So this is what the seed looks like that was procured, the lettuce seeds, and those who would have put up the pictures know yourself, you could identify them. This is one Lincoln Passad having having some crops planted in buckets there, and this is the method that some persons use, using trays with their seeds and the pro-mix soil to begin the process of having the lettuce begin to sprout. I'm thankful that our group, we have a lot of persons who are really excited. Persons are really gearing up to get the project done, and almost on a daily basis, they are finding out and asking questions and sharing information so that everyone could benefit, because we have gone the route of persons securing their seats for themselves at this point and setting them according to the guidelines as shared at the last class. I thank you very much.
Okay, that was good. I just want to remind you, especially for next time, David, Daria, and a couple others, make sure you put your full name and the name that you would like to see appearing on your certificate. So we'd be calling on different personalities in the conference office together with Sister Gabrielle, will sign your certificates upon successful completion of the course. All you have to do is make sure you attend all the sessions. If you miss the session, the recorded session is provided so that you could catch up and ask questions. You have the whole week to do your assignments, and if you keep up with the assignments, at the end of the 4th session, you will be in a position to graduate. Next week, we will do grow boxes. It's a way of preparation of a grow box. It is not compulsory that you prepare a grow box because you can do a container, do container farming, but it is a step forward in developing your agriculture from a holistic point of view, especially those who are looking at doing some organic growing and staying away from some of the chemicals. And not every time you would be getting away from the chemicals. There's some chemicals that are extremely toxic. I will never recommend them. And just to give you the heads up, and I think I said it at the last class, the labels are either yellow, green, blue, or red. Yellow is the mildest, red is the most dangerous. I don't touch chemicals that are labeled red. I don't like blue. I don't like any, but if I must use something, I use yellow. And neem is a naturally existing insecticide extracted from neem trees, and it's very useful. Liquid detergent used in warm water is extremely useful for insects. Fungus, we have no other cure but using maybe copper sulfate, which is accepted for organic agriculture. But more than that, keeping the field clean, getting rid of contaminated material, not moving from one bed to the next without cleansing your boots, not letting people traverse your field, and they came from all over the place with soil-borne diseases in their shoes or slippers. Those things would be helpful. One more point I want to make, because it came up a few times in the lecture. If you cut off a branch from a plant that is laden with fungus or has symptoms of a fungus, when you put it in the bag, it is useful if you had a small bag, a plastic bag, and you microwave it for a few minutes. It will kill all the spores instead of just sending it to the garbage. I do know we tracked an example in the days when the giant African snail just came, where one of the garbage truck had a snail stuck between the 2 back wheels, and it took it from the dump all the way to Wallerfield. So some of these things happen where diseases are transported just because of negligence. Some of you would not have heard it yet, but just like you have worms in guavas, there's a worm in mango, and it's called mango seed weevil. And we really do have it in Trinidad. We are lucky, but it's right there in Grenada. When people bring mangoes using the cargo vessels, I remember right here in my village being at a neighbor, and they said, we train away all those mangoes, they have worms in them. I said, no, hold it. Don't just throw them away, because the worms would emerge, the adult would form, they will go and lay in somebody else's tree, and then we'll have worms and mangoes in Trinidad. So let's stop the cycle. Take the mango one by one, microwave them in your oven so that you will kill the larval form, and the adult will not therefore develop to lay eggs. If that had happened, could you imagine what would have happened in Trinidad? We would have had, you don't know which mango you're sucking, which one has worms, because they're in there also enjoying the mango, just like the worms enjoy the guava. So I'm just saying all of that to say, if you remove diseased parts of your plants and you put it in the bag, microwave it before you get rid of it. Unless it's a big farm, that's why chemicals are being used today, because of commercialized farms, big farms. And yes, there are organic alternatives, but they tend to be a little more expensive. That we'll do in another class. Sister Gabrielle, we had a full night. I give you the last word. I hand the mic over to you.
I'm seeing one other hand up. Are you taking one more question, or that's it? You're
muted. If you say take it, I will.
Okay, so Ava, quickly, we take your last question as we close.
Yes,
Go ahead,
sir,
Ava.
I want to find out, I want to find out, since I put my seedling in the sun, if it die and if I have to set over a new batch.
Okay, my question to you is, when you set it, it was in the sun from the start?
No, sir. I have it in a room and during the day I put it out in the sun.
Okay, how many days old now?
5 days.
Okay, so you kept it in a room for 5 days?
No, I put it in the sun during the day. I put it
Okay,
back in
leave
the
it in
room.
the sun from now on. Are they
But I
emerging
didn't
now
put
from
it
the
in the
soil?
sun today.
You
I didn't
didn't?
put it in the sun today because
Okay.
today plenty rainfall.
Okay, all right. Now, there's something called hardening of the seedlings. If they emerge in sunlight, not a problem. But if they emerge in shade, before you could plant that seedling out, you now have to harden it by introducing it to an hour of sunlight, then 2 hours, then 3, and by day 7 or so, it would have hardened enough to take the full sunlight. So don't pet it. It
So
started
it will
getting the
grow,
sun, give it
still
the
grow?
sun. Yeah, it will grow.
It will still grow?
It will still grow.
Okay then, thanks.
Yes. What seeds did you plant?
Lettuce.
Lettuce, all right. Okay. And are they emerging from the soil?
I don't know. I didn't see nothing going on.
Well, nothing emerging then. So you make sure you keep it damp. Don't wet it too much and leave it in the sun.
Oh, leave it in the sun?
Yes, leave it in the sun. If you want to encourage some germination, you could cover it with a leaf and peep under the leaf every day until you see them coming out. When they're coming out, remove the leaf. Like a banana leaf or a big
So put it
tanya
in the
leaf.
sun. Put it in the sun and put the banana leaf over it?
Yes, that's right. And as you see
Okay,
them
sir.
beginning to emerge, move out the leaf.
Okay then.
Right,
Thank
that's
you
just to
very
keep
much.
in some heat, because for germination you need heat, oxygen, and water. The
Okay,
oxygen
sir,
is in the
thanks.
soil, the water is already there, you watered it. It gets
Yeah.
excessive water when rain falls, but you need some heat. So if it is wet and you put it in the shade,
Okay, sir.
you know, the heat is a little subdued there.
But what I did, I
Although
put a little tray underneath it with some water. When I take it out the sun, I put a tray with some water underneath it and it'll stay moist and nice.
okay, I hope your moist is the moist that is desirable, because if you have it too wet, then the seeds would die. Huh? Don't bother to put the tray with the water under it. I
Okay.
suggest you discontinue that part of the practice. Okay, learn to wet it on top and let
Okay,
the
sir.
water drain off. Don't put too much water. Okay,
Okay then, thank you.
whatever, and keep some
Yes,
pictures
thank you,
of
sir.
them emerging so we can all
Okay,
see.
bye.
All right. I want to thank everyone and turn
Okay,
you back
thank you.
over to Gabrielle so that we could have a formal closing and pray.
Yes. Leon, before I ask Sister Kay Gary to pray for us, she said she found caterpillars eating her kale. Any advice for her?
Yeah, that's a tough one. One of the weakest insecticide on the market is malathion. Let me just share this with you. Malathion is so weak, they had to put a substance in it for it to smell bad to prevent human beings from trying to drink it. Because, and don't quote me on it, but if you had a mouthful of malathion, it wouldn't kill you. It is extremely weak. You have to probably consume a whole pint of malathion on an empty stomach to try to poison yourself. So a couple drops of malathion in a half gallon of water will not do any harm. But these caterpillars are obviously feeding. They like your kale. I don't know what else I could recommend, because you'll be trying to get the spray onto the caterpillars to kill them. But if you could pick them off in the night and drop them in a bowl of soap water, they'll all die. You must see them crawling around, and maybe you could even try applying some warm water with soap. They will all fall off instantly. Look for them falling out. If they fall into the pot, take them out of the pot and drop them in the water. There won't be more than 10 caterpillars, but they eat a lot and they grow fast and they eat more until they change into pupal stage. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Granger. And we can continue this discussion in the group chat. Those of you who are new, please send me a WhatsApp message so that I can add you to the group chat. Feel free to ask your questions. Either Brother Granger, one of the officers from the Ministry of Agriculture, will answer as best we could. And until next week, enjoy planting. So Sister Kay Gary, can you unmute and do the closing prayer for us, please?
Sure. Our Father in heaven, we just want to thank you for the time spent in this special class this evening. We've learned so much, Lord, and all to help us to grow healthy food so that our bodies can be healthy. I ask you to continue to bless our facilitators and the Princeton Church who has organized this special meeting. Help us as pupils and students to do our homework and do it well. And bless our activities in gardening, we ask. Give us a good night rest when we do go to sleep. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Feel free to unmute your mics and say hi and good night as we leave.
I would have loved to hear from JC
Good night.
and Jenny
Good
and
night,
Mary.
everyone. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.